Hi team and welcome. Congratulations on making it this far. What we're going to be moving into next is loading your chart of accounts into your Xero. Your chart of accounts is really the structure that informs your financial reporting from this point forward. So it's pretty important that we give this some due consideration. There are two options that we can go with. One where we start with a Xero chart of accounts and massage that to our needs. And option B, which is where we take our previous chart of accounts from our prior accounting system and put that into a Xero format. In this session here, I'm going to be going through option A first, and in the next lesson we'll be going through option B. So let's crack on.
So here we are in our setup of all Blue Jays apparel, and we're in our chart of accounts tab. In this session we're going to be going through using the default chart of accounts provided by Xero. This is by far the easiest option and really good if you're just starting out and you're not too sure what a chart of accounts should look like or what that might mean to you. What your chart of accounts is the structure behind your financial reporting, so it is quite important, and the Xero one is a great place to get started if you're otherwise indifferent. So we're going to click next, and what it's going to do for us is provide us the default chart of accounts, and you'll see what I mean. One of the key things about a chart of accounts, one of the parts that confuses people most, is this numbering system. And all this numbering system does is make sure that each account is unique. So you'll see that you've got everything from all your revenue accounts through your direct costs, whatever those might be, all those overheads that you incur in running a business, and then right down the bottom we get into our assets, our debtors, our accounts payable, fixed assets, and so it's basically got everything that we could possibly represent in a transaction inside our business. What you'll notice about this chart of accounts is that it's not industry specific. So what we're going to do is we're going to massage this into your industry. So for example, sales here, if we open that up, you might be a landscaper, and so you might provide two different sorts of sales. You might provide landscape design and landscape delivery or contracting perhaps, or equipment hire, for example. So you might rename the sales landscape design. And that's where you're going to put all your revenue, and when you're generating your customer invoices, that's where we're going to send all of our revenue related to that service. So in our little blurb here, we're going to call that revenue from landscape design. So that's one example. The demo I'm working in is all Blue Jays apparel. So in this one, I'm going to call this just perhaps direct sales. So that'll be where I have people on the road going out and selling my apparel. And revenue from direct sales activities. That would be a relevant example for this demo. So now direct sales doesn't represent all of my income, so I might need to add an additional account to this. And my advice for this is to actually stick in the same numbering sequence. These numbers, you'll notice all of our revenues in this default chart of accounts appear to be in the 200s. All of our direct costs, which are the costs directly associated with selling, in this scenario, for example, would be the buying or the paying for the goods that I'm importing. That would be in the 300s, and all of our expenses are in the 400s. So you notice they kind of group up based on the number. So to keep them in the same number, a quick top tip from me is to use these tabs at the top. If I'm adding revenue accounts and I go to the revenue tab, it just simplifies that list so I can see all of my revenue accounts in one location. So I'm going to add another sort of sales account, and this one's going to be for online sales. Just to continue using that example. And the number that I'm going to use will be 210. So I can see where that fits in into my sequence there. So this will be online sales. So sales from online stores. Online store. Great. 15% GST on income. Very good. Cool. So as you can see, we're creating accounts as we need them, specific to our industry, starting with that Xero chart of accounts as our basis, and we're going to massage each tab from there. So once I've done my revenue accounts, what I'm going to do is move into my direct costs. So cost of goods sold, that is well suited to an importer or distributor. That's the cost of the goods that I'm selling, obviously, but I might want to call this something different, and I can easily rename it if I want to. So cost of goods sold is a fairly standard term for this sort of business, so I'm going to leave that as is. But if you're perhaps you're you have you're in another sort of industry where you might have a different name for the direct costs associated with delivering your service or purchasing your product. Excellent. Cool. So here's all our expense-based costs. Most of these are pretty standard as well, so you can skip past most of these until you get to so inventory. That's you may not. I'm going to need that as an inventory-based business, but if you're a professional service, then we can archive that away or delete that out. So I'm going to tick that box and say, well, I don't need inventory, and I'm going to click delete. Unfortunately, I do need inventory, so I'm going to leave that alone. Great. So here's my fixed asset accounts, and so this is a good opportunity to look at the assets in your business, and we're going to need this later on when we're setting up your fixed assets. So it comes with two standard asset classes, office equipment and computer equipment, but you might very well have vehicles as a common one, motor vehicles, land or property, and equipment perhaps, tools. You're going to have other sorts of classes, and so for each new class you need, we're going to need to add some extra accounts in there. One of the great things about Xero is that you can actually do this later on. So this is just our initial chart of accounts. If down the line we acquire some goods or some fixed assets that we need to add, we can do that as we need to at that point. So just to get us started on the right foot, I've gone to the Assets tab, and I know for a fact I have motor vehicles, so I'm going to create a motor vehicle account, and the way I'm going to do that is to, I can see all my fixed assets here in the 700s, so I'm going to create one for 730, for example, by clicking Add Account, like so. I'm going to call that fixed asset. If you're at all unsure about what to choose in this list, take a look at these prompts here. This is exactly how it gets laid out. So if you're familiar with your profit and loss and balance sheet, then you should get a good idea about where things belong. So I'm going to create a fixed asset account here called motor vehicles. I'm going to call it 730 just to follow that sequence. And value of motor vehicles. Vehicles. Excellent. Just like that. Cool. So you notice that the motor vehicle itself actually does carry GST, but our accumulated depreciation, which if you're not familiar with that, that is the value that we decrease to represent the life of that, the useful life of that asset. So our motor vehicles don't live forever, and neither do our office equipment. So we depreciate that each period, and the accumulated depreciation is just the sum of all of those. So we need somewhere to put that as well. So as a rule, every asset class that you create should have its own accumulated depreciation account. So I'm going to create one for 731, and that'll be accumulated depreciation. Fixed asset, 731. You notice if I type in 730, it's going to tell me no, that's not available. So the only requirement of that code is that it be unique, but as a top tip, as I said, try to keep the families of accounts together. So I'm going to call this less accumulated depreciation motor vehicles. And as I described, this will be the total depreciation. Depreciation for motor vehicles. Cool. So unlike its actual asset relative here, this one will be no GST because it's not a good or a service. It's an accounting fiction. It is depreciation. So fantastic. So that's a good example of the kind of massaging that we would do there. So I'm going to work through each of my categories and working through my fixed assets, current assets, and one of the ones that's really commonly edited is down here. When you get to the bottom, you'll find that we've got a few equity accounts. Now, retained earnings, we're going to leave that alone. It's a system account. That's where all of our profit and loss goes at the end of the year. But here you've got owner A funds introduced and owner A drawings. So if you're the only owner, you can simply rename this to be Reuben or Sweeney, for example, funds introduced, and that represents all the funds that I'd introduced into this business. And same with the drawings. So whenever I take drawings that aren't paid out in wages and salaries, for example, that's the account we're going to use for that. But if you've got other owners, you're going to want to create accounts for those as well. So we might create a 990, for example, for another person that we have in this business. So generally, each owner will have have their own funds introduced and drawings account. So go ahead and create those just like I have. You'll notice there's no GST on this either because it's not a good or a service. Now, you might have seen that as we've been working through these accounts, there are some little buttons down here you might need to be aware of. So from top to bottom, you've got the option to show on dashboard watch list. Now, this isn't very relevant right now, but as we get through your Xero setup, you'll see that one of the cool things about Xero is we get a dashboard, which is like a quick view, a quick overview of what's happening in our business. And so if we tick that box there, it's going to mean that my direct sales account, the current value of that for the time period that I'm looking at is going to display on my dashboard. So it's going to be top of mind every time I log into Xero. That's what I'm going to see. So if I want this account to do that, then I want to tick that box. I'd advise you to be sparing about this because often too much information it equals no information. You just kind of glance over it because it's just too much. So be sparing about the accounts you choose, and if at all unsure, just leave them unticked for now, and down the line when we come across that need, we're going to use this tick box again. The next one here is show and expense claims, and again, this is something that will become a bit more relevant later on, but a lot of these, this is not such a good example, but perhaps if we opened up here we go, motor vehicle expenses, so that might be our fuel, etc. We would want that to be to display an expense claims. That's the sort of thing I'm going to need my staff, or I'm going to need to personally expense claim. If I'm incurring costs on behalf of the business, then what kind of costs are those likely to be? They're going to be things like motor vehicles. They're going to be things like travel nationally, international. I might have I'm unlikely to pay salaries, on my credit card, my personal credit card, but I am likely to incur. Perhaps I put my insurance. Perhaps not, but entertainment. There you go. There's a good example there. So anything I'm likely to incur personally, I want to tick show and expense claims because that's going to let me, from a mobile device and from a desktop, it's going to shorten my expense list, get rid of all the stuff that we know is paid on accounts payable, and just shorten it down to the stuff we need when we're out and about and incurring costs. So that's what that field there means. And the last field, perhaps the most confusing of all three, is enable payments to this account. And I'm just going to give you a rule of thumb here. We only use this field here when we're dealing with bank accounts because they need to be able to receive payments, obviously, and shareholder current accounts, okay? So if you're at all uncertain, leave it unticked. And if you need to create a bank account, then like we're going to next, we're going to make sure we enable payments to that account. So now that we've kind of finalized our initial chart of accounts, what we need to do is add in our bank accounts, because you'll notice there's no bank accounts in here under our assets tab. So for each of our business bank accounts, we might have 2 or 3 or 5, we need to go and create an account. So the way we do that is by taking add bank account, and we're going to type in the bank that we're using. So I'll type in go with ASB here, and we're going to enter in our account name. So it'll be a focus account, I guess, or just operating account. We'll go with that. Account code, account type will be every day. So you've got a set list here, and here's where we type in our account number. I'm not too sure how fussy this is, so I think it goes a bit like this. 6 7 0 0. Great. Oh, there you go. So you notice that when we add that account, it doesn't actually get a chart of account code. It's a real common fault, is to leave that blank. One of the reasons we shouldn't do that is because if ever we need to bulk update our chart of accounts, or whenever we're manipulating that data later on, this code is going to be very important because it's the unique identifier. So for this operating account, I'm going to make this account 010, and I'm going to add another account for 020, and that'll be my savings account perhaps. So make that with ASB. This will be savings account 020, and this will be a savings account. So it'll be 123016576. Actually 67, and this will be a 0 or 50, for example. See if that accepts that. Good stuff. Cool. So I'm going to continue in that fashion, and you're going to add each of your credit cards, checking account, savings account, any balance that you have at a bank needs to be in here, and it needs to have a code in it. Okay. So once we've done those bank accounts, we're going to click next, and that's our chart of accounts.
As you can see, using the default chart of accounts provided by Xero gets us running with Xero quickly. With a little bit of massaging around our revenue, our direct costs, checking our overheads, and modifying some of our equity accounts, we pretty quickly get a very relevant chart of accounts to what we do. Whether we're a product-based business or a service-based or membership-based business, our chart of accounts is going to reflect the activities that we do.